The gates of Riverside Correctional Facility slammed shut behind Marlene Watson with a metallic clang. 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days. That was how long it had been since she had walked through those doors as an innocent woman. Now she was leaving a completely different person. The October wind in New Haven was colder than she remembered. The city had grown over the years. New skyscrapers stretched toward the gray sky, and familiar streets were lost among modern shopping malls and office complexes. The population had almost reached 1.5 million, transforming the once cozy industrial center into a true metropolis. In her hands, Marlene held a worn plastic bag with a few belongings and an envelope with the address of a halfway house for former prisoners. But she had no intention of going there. For 7 years, she hadn't just been serving her sentence, she had been preparing. Her first stop was the public library on Main Street. Marlene remembered every detail of the day her life fell apart. On March 15, 2017, the police found the body of Robert Green, their neighbor, in the basement of an apartment building. He had been shot in the chest with a 9mm Beretta pistol, the same one David had given her for her birthday for protection. Robert was a small-time drug dealer, but to Marlene, he was just a lonely old man whom she sometimes helped with his shopping. David testified that he saw her leaving the house late at night with a bag. Jessica, who was working at New Haven Insurance at the time, provided David with an alibi. They had allegedly spent the entire evening watching a movie at her house. Marlene's fingerprints were found on the gun. The victim's blood was found in her bag, and witnesses saw her near Robert's house on the day of the murder. Sitting at a computer in the library, Marlene opened a search engine. During her years in prison, she had studied every detail of her case, every inconsistency. Robert Green owed a large sum of money to drug dealers from a neighboring neighborhood. David worked at Premium Motors car dealership and had connections with shady people who often bought cars there for cash. Jessica specialized in insurance fraud and had access to confidential customer information. Now Marlene understood the whole picture. David had killed Robert because of drug-related debts. Perhaps the old man knew something compromising. Jessica helped cover up the traces and create an alibi, and Marlene became the perfect scapegoat, a wife with access to a gun who regularly visited the victim. The first internet search yielded results. David was still working at the same car dealership, but now he was the general manager. Jessica became the insurance claims director at the same company. They got married 6 months after Marlene's trial. The cynicism of this fact brought a bitter smile to her face. They had a house together in the prestigious Oak Hill neighborhood, a Mercedes in the garage, and a joint bank account with an impressive balance. They lived the life that should have belonged to Marlene, built on her suffering. But the most interesting discovery was yet to come. After digging through social media, Marlene found out that David and Jessica's marriage was far from perfect. Jessica regularly complained to her friends about her husband's emotional coldness, and David had started actively chatting with young women on Facebook in recent months. Marlene did not waste her time in prison. She studied psychology, read books on criminology, and analyzed court cases. Working in the prison hospital, she refreshed her medical knowledge and learned about the effects of various drugs. Most importantly, she learned to read people, to understand their weaknesses and fears. The plan had been brewing for years. It wasn't impulsive revenge, but a surgically precise operation to restore justice. David and Jessica had to lose everything: their reputation, their freedom, each other, just as she had once lost. Leaving the library, Marlene headed for the city center. She needed a new identity, a temporary job, and a place to live. In prison, she had met a woman named Mary Jones, who had died of cancer a year before Marlene's release. Mary had no relatives, and her documents had somehow been lost in the archives. Marlene spent months rebuilding her identity through the connections of other inmates. A hair salon on the corner of Broadway and Fifth Avenue was her next stop. Marlene dyed her hair from chestnut brown to platinum blonde, got a haircut, and applied light makeup. The woman in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. 7 years of harsh prison discipline had made her slimmer and more resilient. A new hairstyle and clothes bought at the nearest store completed the transformation. By evening, Mary Jones had rented a small apartment in Midtown, 20 minutes drive from David and Jessica's house. The apartment was modest but clean, with good internet and a view of the office building where New Haven Insurance was located. Sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, Marlene watched the insurance company building. Employees were leaving the office, and among them she recognized a familiar figure. Jessica had hardly changed. The same curly brown hair, the same business suit, the same confident gait. But even from a distance, Marlene noticed the tension in her movements, the fatigue in her posture. A phone call interrupted her observation. Tom Rodriguez, the lawyer who had helped her in prison, was checking on her well-being. Tom was one of the few people who believed in her innocence. Over the years she had spent in prison, he had become not only her lawyer, but also a close friend. "Marlene, I'm glad to hear your voice," he said. "How's the adjustment going? If you need help with work or housing..." "Thanks, Tom. Everything's fine so far. I'll manage." "I know you will. But remember, revenge won't bring back the years you lost. Maybe you should just start a new life." Marlene looked at the insurance company building where the woman who had ruined her life worked. "A new life has already begun," she replied and hung up. That night, Marlene laid out all the materials she had gathered during the day on the table. Photos, printouts from social media, addresses, schedules. She drew up a detailed map of her enemies' lives, where they worked, what they ate for lunch, which gym they went to, who they hung out with. The plan was simple in essence, but difficult to execute. She had to become part of their lives, gain their trust, and study their weaknesses. Then she would use those weaknesses to destroy them. David had always been narcissistic and greedy. Jessica was ambitious and paranoid. 7 years ago, those qualities had helped them frame an innocent woman. Now those same qualities would be their downfall. Marlene smiled as she looked at the wedding photo she had kept all these years. In the picture, she and David looked happy. Back then, she believed in love, in justice, in the idea that good always triumphs over evil. Monday began for Mary Jones with a job interview at the Professional Plus employment agency. Marlene had spent the weekend creating a flawless resume for her alter ego. Mary Jones was an experienced administrator with 10 years of experience working for various medium-sized companies. The letters of recommendation that Marlene had obtained through her connections in prison looked completely authentic. "We have an excellent opening for an administrative assistant at an insurance company," said the recruitment consultant, looking through the documents. "New Haven Insurance is looking for an experienced employee to work with clients. The salary is good, with full benefits." Marlene barely suppressed a smile. Fate seemed to be on her side. "That sounds perfect," she replied in the voice of Mary Jones, slightly higher and softer than her own. "When can you start?" 2 hours later, she was sitting in the reception area of New Haven Insurance on the 23rd floor of a skyscraper in the city's business district. The office was luxurious, with marble floors, panoramic windows, and expensive furniture. The company was clearly thriving. The interview was conducted by the Assistant Director of Human Resources, a young man in an expensive suit. Marlene answered the questions confidently, demonstrating exactly the qualities required for the position. She was the ideal candidate, experienced, reliable, unassuming. "Welcome to the team, Mary," he said at the end of the meeting. "You start tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Your immediate supervisor is Jessica Hayes, Director of Insurance Claims. She will brief you on your responsibilities." Marlene's heart was pounding, but she kept her composure. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down." That evening, sitting in her apartment, Marlene devised a strategy for her first contact with Jessica. She had to be careful, too friendly or too competent, and she might arouse suspicion. The ideal image was that of a modest, hard-working employee who needed guidance. At the same time, she created a Facebook profile under the name Valerie Stone, an attractive 32-year-old divorcee working in marketing. She downloaded photos from the profiles of real women living in other cities and edited them slightly. Valerie was exactly the type of woman David had always liked. Ambitious but not too smart, attractive but approachable. The next morning, Marlene walked into the New Haven Insurance office as Mary Jones. She was shown into Jessica's office, a spacious room with a view of the city park. Sitting behind a massive dark wood desk was the woman who had ruined her life. Jessica looked older than her 36 years. Stress and years of lies had left their mark on her face. Fine lines around her eyes, a tense line around her lips, a nervous twitch in her left eyelid. But she was still a beautiful woman, even if her beauty seemed tired. "Mary Jones?" Jessica held out her hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jessica Hayes. I hope we'll work well together." Marlene shook the hand of the woman she hated more than anyone else in the world and smiled. "Likewise, Mrs. Hayes. I'm ready to learn and work." "Great. Let me show you around the office and introduce you to your coworkers." For the next few hours, Marlene learned about the company from the inside. Jessica managed a department of 12 people who handled large insurance claims. It was a responsible position that required access to confidential information and a lot of authority. By lunchtime, Marlene already understood that Jessica was a perfectionist with signs of obsessive-compulsive disorder. She checked every document 3 times, demanded absolute accuracy in every detail, and got nervous when things didn't go according to plan. She was the perfect target for psychological pressure. "Mary, you did better than I expected on your first day," Jessica said at the end of the workday. "Do you have any experience with insurance documents?" "A little," Marlene lied. "Mostly with health insurance, but I'm a quick learner." "Great. Tomorrow I'll show you our electronic system. It's a bit complicated, but you'll get used to it." That evening, Marlene activated Valerie Stone's Facebook profile. The first thing she did was find David's page and carefully study his activity. Over the past few months, he had frequently liked photos of young women, left ambiguous comments, and engaged in private conversations. Valerie sent him a friend request with the message, "Hi, we went to school together in New Haven. Do you remember me? I recently moved back to town after my divorce and am looking for old friends." David accepted the request within an hour and replied, "Of course I remember. How are you? Glad you're back." The hook was set. Over the next few days, Marlene cautiously gained Jessica's trust. She brought her coffee, asked naive questions about her work, and took an interest in her personal life. Jessica, who was apparently craving attention, willingly shared details. "You know, Mary, sometimes it seems like family life is nothing but stress," she confessed one day during lunch break. "My husband works late, we hardly see each other, and when we do, we just fight." "What do you fight about?" Marlene asked gently. "Everything and nothing. Money, work, plans for the future. David has become distant. Sometimes I think he doesn't love me anymore." Marlene nodded sympathetically. "Maybe he just needs some time. Men deal with stress differently." "Maybe," Jessica sighed. "But sometimes I feel like he's hiding something. Phone calls he doesn't answer when I'm around, coming home late. Strange excuses." Doubts were already gnawing at her. Marlene only needed to fuel them. At the same time, Valerie Stone was developing a relationship with David on social media. Their correspondence was becoming increasingly personal. David complained about problems in his marriage, his wife's lack of understanding, and the routine of family life. Valerie skillfully played the role of an understanding friend who was always ready to listen and support him. "Jess has become so cold," he wrote. "We used to be able to talk for hours, but now every conversation turns into an argument. I don't know what's going on with her." "Maybe she senses your distance and is reacting defensively," Valerie replied. "Women often do that when they're afraid of losing a man." "I don't think so. I think she's just tired of me. Sometimes I catch her looking at me with a strange expression. It's like she's studying me, analyzing me." That was interesting. Maybe Jessica suspected something too. By the end of her first week on the job, Marlene already felt like part of the office. Her coworkers had welcomed her, and Jessica was entrusting her with more and more important tasks. Mary Jones was the perfect employee, unobtrusive but efficient. On Friday, Jessica stayed late at the office, sorting through a complicated insurance claim. Marlene offered to help and stayed with her. As they worked together on the documents, they talked more openly than usual. "You know, Mary, sometimes I feel like my life is a complete lie," Jessica confessed, rubbing her tired eyes. "Work, family, friends, everywhere I have to wear a mask, pretend." "What do you mean?" Marlene asked cautiously. Jessica was silent for a long time, as if weighing whether to continue. "We all have secrets, don't we? things we don't tell anyone, things we regret doing. Of course, Marlene agreed, but sometimes it's better not to stir up the past. What if the past stirs you up? Jessica looked out the window at the lights of the city at night. What if you think every day about how things could have been different? Marlene felt she was on the verge of an important discovery. Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger. But the moment had passed. Jessica shook her head and returned to her documents. I'm sorry, I'm tired. Let's call it a day. That same evening, Valerie received a message from David. Can we meet up? I want to talk to a real person, not a screen. Marlene replied, Of course, but I don't want to cause any problems in your family. You won't. We're just old friends who've met up after a long time apart. They arranged to meet on Saturday at a cafe in the city center. Marlene carefully thought out Valerie's look. Elegant but not provocative, friendly but not too accessible. She needed to intrigue David but not scare him away. David arrived at the meeting right on time. He hadn't changed much in 7 years. The same blonde hair, now slightly graying, the same blue eyes, the same confident gaze. But Marlene noticed new features. Tiredness, tension around his eyes, nervousness in his movements. Valerie, you look amazing. He hugged her like an old friend. Thanks, Dave. You look good too. Marriage suits you, she lied, watching his face darken slightly at the mention of marriage. They ordered coffee and began talking about their school days, mutual acquaintances, and changes in the city. David gradually relaxed and became more open. Marlene carefully steered the conversation in the right direction. Tell me about your wife, she asked. Does she make you happy? David hesitated. Jess is a complicated person. She's smart, ambitious, beautiful, but sometimes I feel like we live in different worlds. How long have you been together? We've been together for 8 years, married for 7. You know, when we first met, there was such passion, such understanding between us. We could talk for hours about nothing and not notice the time passing. And now? Now every conversation is a minefield. She analyzes my every word, looking for hidden meanings. Sometimes I feel like a suspect being interrogated. Marlene nodded sympathetically. Maybe she's just going through a difficult period. Work? Stress? Maybe. But I'm thinking more and more about whether I made the right choice. You know, there are things in our past, events that changed us both, and not for the better. Marlene's heart began to race. He was talking about murder. Do you want to tell me? David stared out the window for a long time, struggling with an internal conflict. Better not. Some secrets are better kept to oneself. The meeting lasted 2 hours. David clearly didn't want to go home, continuing to order coffee and find new topics of conversation. Marlene realized that she had hooked him. I have to go, she said finally. But it was very nice to see you. I hope we meet again. Definitely, he replied, his voice betraying his relief. You're like a breath of fresh air in my life. That evening, analyzing the day's events, Marlene drew her first conclusions. Jessica was tormented by guilt and suspicions about her husband's fidelity. David was unhappy in his marriage and ready for an affair. Mistrust and alienation are growing between them, the perfect conditions for them to start destroying each other. Marlene opened her laptop and began typing out a plan for the next stage. The psychological pressure had to be increased gradually, imperceptibly, like a slow-acting poison that poisons the body from within. Outside the window, the lights of New Haven were burning. The city that was once her home and is now a battlefield. A battle she had no intention of losing. Monday morning began for Mary Jones with coffee and newspapers in the office kitchen. Jessica looked particularly exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, nervous movements, trembling hands. The weekend had clearly not gone well. Rough weekend? Marlene asked gently, pouring coffee into 2 cups. You could say that, Jessica said gratefully, taking the cup. David came home late on Saturday and said he was meeting an old friend, but he was wearing unfamiliar cologne. Marlene feigned sympathy, though inside she was triumphant. The plan was working faster than she had expected. Maybe you're just tired and starting to suspect things where there's no reason to. No, Mary. I'm not paranoid. In 8 years, I've gotten to know David like an open book. He's hiding something. Jessica nervously bit her lip. You know what's the scariest thing? Sometimes I feel like he looks at me like I'm his enemy. Like, he's afraid I'll find out something. This was gold. Jessica was feeding Marlene the topics she needed to develop. Do you have any secrets from him? Mary asked innocently. Jessica froze with the cup at her lips. Something like fear flashed in her eyes. All spouses have secrets, she replied evasively. The question is how critical they are to the relationship. Over the course of a week, Marlene methodically worked to destroy the trust between the couple. She learned to read Jessica's mood and planted the right thoughts at the right moments. You know, my ex-husband also started staying late at work before I found out he was cheating on me, she shared a fictional story over lunch. First, it was meetings with clients, then company parties, then just traffic jams. Lies have a way of snowballing. Jessica listened intently to every word. How did you find out the truth? I accidentally stumbled across some messages on his phone. He forgot to lock the screen. Marlene paused for effect. But to be honest, I had my suspicions long before that. A woman's intuition is rarely wrong. And what did you do? I gathered evidence. You can't base your conclusions on emotions alone. You need facts. That evening, Jessica checked her sleeping husband's phone for the first time. Marlene knew about it because Valerie received a message from an agitated David. Jess started snooping through my phone. What's going on with her? She's never done that before. Maybe she's just worried about your relationship, Valerie replied. Women sometimes act irrationally when they feel threatened. But what threat? I'm not doing anything. Except talking to me, Valerie wrote playfully. Maybe she's jealous of our friendship. She doesn't even know about you. That's exactly the problem. Secrets destroy trust, even the most innocent ones. Marlene skillfully pushed David to confess their relationship to Jessica, knowing that it would only increase his wife's suspicions. The following week, Marlene took more active measures. Using her access to Jessica's work computer, she began to examine her emails and documents. What she discovered exceeded all expectations. Jessica was indeed involved in insurance fraud. Her files contained documents about overpayments to non-existent clients, fictitious damage reports, and forged medical reports. The amounts were impressive. Over the past 3 years, she had illegally obtained more than $500,000. But the most interesting folder was one labeled Personal, Do Not Touch. It contained photos, documents, and notes related to the murder of Robert Greene. Jessica had kept a detailed diary of the events of those days, as if preparing for possible exposure. March 15th, 2017. Everything went according to plan. David did better than I expected. Marlene doesn't suspect a thing. Tomorrow, the police will find the body. March 16th, 2017. It started. Marlene has been arrested. She's in shock and continues to claim she's innocent. David is playing the role of the devastated husband perfectly. March 22nd, 2017. The trial is scheduled for May. Marlene's lawyer is weak, and the evidence against her is ironclad. Soon it will all be over, and we can live in peace. Every line of this diary was a knife in Marlene's heart. But she forced herself to read it all the way through. She needed to know the whole truth. It turned out that Robert Greene really did owe money to drug dealers, but not to David. The old man had accidentally witnessed one of Jessica's insurance scams and started blackmailing her. He threatened to tell the police everything if she didn't pay him $50,000. Jessica and David decided to kill him and frame Marlene. The plan was carefully thought out. David lured Robert to the basement under the pretext of buying drugs, shot him with Marlene's gun, and then they planted the evidence together. Jessica provided an alibi and gave false testimony, but the most shocking part was the last sentence in the diary. If anything goes wrong, David must take sole responsibility. I have a recording of our conversation in the car before the murder. He suggested killing Robert first. Jessica was prepared to betray David if necessary. Marlene copied all the files to a flash drive and carefully restored the computer to its original state. Now she had proof of their guilt, but she had to use it with extreme caution. Meanwhile, the relationship between Valerie and David was becoming increasingly intimate. They met twice a week, and their correspondence was full of hints and innuendo. David was clearly falling in love with his virtual girlfriend. "I can't stop thinking about you," he wrote. "You give me what I'm missing at home: understanding, support, simple human warmth." "And what does home give you?" Valerie asked. "Stress, suspicion, the feeling that I'm living with a stranger." Jess has changed. She's become suspicious, nervous, aggressive. She's always looking through my things, checking my phone, asking strange questions. Maybe she has reasons to be suspicious? None. Before I met you, I was the perfect husband, faithful, caring, honest. The irony of these words was deafening. The man who had killed a person and framed his own wife was talking about honesty. "And now," Valerie continued her questioning, "now I realize that I am capable of true love. What I have with Jess is not love. It's a habit, an addiction, a fear of being alone." It was time for the next move. Marlene prepared an anonymous letter and sent it to Jessica's work email. "Your husband is cheating on you with a woman named Valerie Stone. They meet every Wednesday and Saturday at the Metropole Cafe on Main Street. If you don't believe me, check for yourself. A concerned friend." The reaction was not long in coming. Jessica was on the verge of a nervous breakdown all day. She rushed around the office, unable to concentrate on her work, checking her phone every few minutes. "Mary, can I have a word?" she called at the end of the working day. Jessica closed the office door and sank into a chair. "What would you do if you found out your husband was cheating on you?" Marlene feigned surprise. "I'm sorry, but that's a very personal question." "I know, but I need advice from someone who isn't involved. Today, I received an anonymous letter accusing David of something." "And you believe it?" "I don't know. On the one hand, anonymous letters are often written by jealous people or psychos. On the other hand, it mentions specific details: meeting places, days of the week, even the woman's name." Marlene pretended to think about her answer. "I think you need proof. If the accusations are false, why ruin your relationship with suspicions? And if they're true, it's better to know the truth." "You mean follow them?" "Check it out. Go to that cafe on Wednesday and see for yourself." Jessica nodded as if she had made up her mind. "Thanks, Mary. You're right. Uncertainty is worse than any truth." On Wednesday, Marlene deliberately stayed late at the office, watching Jessica. At 6:30, she left work, saying she wasn't feeling well. Marlene knew she was going to the Metropole Cafe, where Valerie and David were supposed to meet at that time. The meeting went exactly as Marlene had planned. Jessica saw her husband with an attractive stranger, their laughter, their touches, the intimate atmosphere of their conversation. For a jealous wife, that was enough to draw conclusions. The next day, Jessica came to work with red eyes from crying and a determined expression on her face. "Mary, you were right. Sometimes it's better to know the bitter truth than to live in sweet illusions." "What did you find out?" "Betrayal. The most banal, vulgar betrayal with some blonde." Jessica's voice trembled with anger. 7 years of marriage and he throws it all away for a casual fling. "What are you going to do now?" "Fight. I'm not going to give up without a fight. I have dirt on him that will ruin his career and his life." Marlene was alarmed. Jessica was talking about Robert Greene's murder. "What kind of dirt?" Jessica stared at her for a long time, as if assessing whether she could be trusted. "It's better not to know. But believe me, if David thinks he can just leave me and go to his mistress, he's sorely mistaken." That evening, David received a text message from his wife. "I know about Valerie. Come home. We need to talk." Valerie immediately received an agitated message. "Jess found out. I don't know how she found out. We won't be able to meet for a while." "What are you going to tell her?" Valerie wrote. "I'll try to deny everything. I'll say it's just friendship." "What if she doesn't believe you?" "Then it'll be war, and I'm not sure I can win." The domestic scandal that night was epic. Neighbors later said they heard screaming until 3 in the morning. The next day, both David and Jessica looked like they had been through a serious illness. But the most interesting part came later. Jessica began gathering evidence of her husband's infidelity, checking his phone, following his movements, hiring a private investigator. David, in turn, began looking for ways to protect himself from possible blackmail by his wife. Marlene watched their war with professional interest. They were slowly but surely destroying each other, and all she had to do was nudge the process in the right direction. On Friday, Jessica asked Mary to stay late after work for an urgent project. In reality, she wanted to talk. "You know what the worst thing about betrayal is?" she began, pouring coffee. "It's not the fact that you've been cheated on. It's the realization that you've been living with someone you didn't know for years." "Maybe people change?" Marlene suggested. "No, people don't change. They just stop hiding their true nature." Jessica smiled bitterly. "David has always been selfish and a liar. He just used to lie more skillfully. What about you? You never lied to him?" The question hung in the air. Jessica was silent for a long time, fighting her inner demons. "Everyone lies, Mary. It's a matter of scale and consequences." "What do you mean?" "David and I have a secret, one that could destroy us both. Until now, it has kept us together. But now it could become a weapon." Marlene held her breath. "A serious secret?" "Deadly serious." Jessica looked Mary straight in the eye. 7 years ago, we did something that could get us life in prison. And if one of us decides to turn the other in, why are you telling me this? Because I need a witness. Someone who can confirm my state of mind when I make my final decision. Marlene understood. Jessica was preparing to kill David or turn him into the police, and she wanted Mary to be her alibi. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 7 years ago." Jessica stood up and walked over to the window. Sometimes the truth is more important than love, and justice is more important than happiness. Marlene hardly slept that night, thinking about what she had heard. The plan was working even better than she had hoped. Jessica and David were on the verge of destroying each other, and all she had to do was give them the final push. Monday began with an alarming phone call. David contacted Valerie at 7 in the morning, his voice trembling with panic. "Jess has completely lost it," he whispered into the phone. "Last night she threatened to tell the police some truth about me. She said I'd regret the day I decided to cheat on her." "What truth?" Valerie asked cautiously. "I can't talk on the phone, but if she follows through, I'm going to life." Marlene felt adrenaline rush through her veins. Events were coming to a head faster than she had planned. "Let's meet tonight. We'll talk," she suggested. In the office, Jessica looked like a coiled spring, ready to snap. She nervously shuffled through documents, checked her phone every few minutes, and when someone unexpectedly addressed her, she flinched as if she had been electrocuted. "Did you sleep badly?" Mary asked sympathetically, bringing her morning coffee. "I didn't sleep at all," Jessica admitted. "I spent the whole night thinking about my conversation with my husband. You know, there are moments in life when you realize there's no turning back. Did something happen?" Jessica looked at Mary for a long time, as if assessing whether she could trust her. "Mary, if you knew that someone had committed a terrible crime, but you had no direct evidence, what would you do?" "It depends on the crime and how much I care about that person." "What if it's murder? What if that person was once dear to you but now betrayed you in the most despicable way?" Marlene's heart was pounding, but she kept her composure. "Murder is serious, but accusations without proof can ruin an innocent person's life. What if there is proof, but getting it would put your life in danger?" Marlene realized that Jessica was talking about the recording of their conversation in the car before Robert's murder. The very recording that could put David in jail, but also her. "Then you need to think very carefully about whether it's worth the risk," Mary replied cautiously. "You know what, Mary? Sometimes principles are more important than safety. I can't live with a man who is capable of murder." The irony of the situation was deafening. Jessica, who had participated in the murder herself, was condemning her husband for the same crime. By lunchtime, the tension in the office was almost palpable. Jessica rushed between her office and the restroom, her hands shaking, constantly adjusting her hair and clothes. Her colleagues began to whisper, casting concerned glances at her. "Maybe you should go home," Mary suggested. "You look sick." "No, I have to be here. Today is the day everything will be decided." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jessica received a message that finally broke her. The private investigator she had hired to follow her husband sent her photos of David and Valerie in an intimate setting. In the pictures, they were kissing, hugging, and entering a hotel together. Jessica threw her phone against the wall and it shattered into pieces. The entire office fell silent. "Jessica, what's going on?" Mary rushed over. "He thinks he can just leave me like that," Jessica whispered, her voice sounding almost animalistic. "He thinks I'll keep quiet and let him build a happy life with someone else." "Calm down. Let's go outside and get some air." "No, I need to call David, right now." Jessica grabbed the secretary's phone and dialed her husband's number. The conversation was short but harsh. "David, it's me. Meet me tonight at 8 o'clock at warehouse number 7 in the industrial zone. Tom, the warehouse where we hid you-know-what. Come alone and don't say a word to anyone. Otherwise, tomorrow the whole town will know the truth about Robert Greene." She hung up and turned to a stunned Mary. "Sorry for the drama, family problems. Jessica, maybe you shouldn't meet your husband in this state. You're too worked up." "On the contrary, I've never thought so clearly in my life." Jessica returned to her desk and began writing something by hand. "Mary, if anything happens to me, give this letter to the police." She handed her a sealed envelope. "What are you talking about? What could happen?" "Anything. David is a dangerous man when he's cornered, and I'm going to corner him." Marlene took the envelope with trembling hands. The plan was changing as she went along, but the possibilities were dizzying. Jessica spent the rest of the workday in a feverish flurry of activity. She copied files, printed documents, made phone calls. She prepared for the final battle with all the thoroughness of a seasoned warrior. At 6:30, she left the office, wishing Mary a good evening. "Goodbye, Mary. Thank you for your support. You're a good person." There was a frightening finality to her words of farewell. Marlene waited until Jessica disappeared into the elevator, then quickly gathered her things. She had less than an hour to prepare for the decisive act. The industrial area on the outskirts of New Haven was the perfect place for a secret meeting. Old warehouses, abandoned workshops, no one around after hours. Warehouse number 7 belonged to a small logistics company that had gone bankrupt long ago. Marlene got there first and surveyed the area. The building was in a sorry state. Broken windows, rusty doors, piles of rubbish everywhere. The perfect place for a crime. She parked her car 2 blocks away and walked to the warehouse. In her bag were rubber gloves, a syringe, and an ampule of concentrated insulin solution. The plan was simple: to fake an overdose of the sedative Jessica had been taking for the past few weeks. At 7:30, David showed up. He looked like a hunted animal, with disheveled hair, a wrinkled shirt, and red eyes. He parked his car right at the entrance and looked around nervously. 10 minutes later, Jessica arrived. She was dressed in a business suit, her hair neatly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was going to an important business meeting, not a showdown with her husband. Marlene took up position in the neighboring building from where she had a good view of the warehouse. She had powerful binoculars and a phone to record the conversation. The couple met at the entrance to the warehouse. Even from a distance, the tension between them was palpable. Jessica was saying something, waving her arms while David tried to calm her down. Then they went inside. Marlene waited until they were out of sight inside the building, then quickly moved closer. Through a broken window, she could hear their conversation. "You thought you could just walk away to your blonde?" Jessica shouted. "After everything we've been through together?" "Jess, listen to me," David pleaded. "It's not what you think. Valerie is just a friend. Don't lie to me. I have photos. You're kissing, hugging, going into hotels." "Okay, yes, we're having an affair, but it doesn't mean anything. You know I can't leave you. We have too much together." "You mean Robert?" There was silence. Marlene held her breath. "Don't say that name," David whispered. "Why? Are you afraid? You should be, because tomorrow morning I'm going to the police and telling them the whole truth." "You can't! It will ruin us both." "Me? Maybe. But you, definitely. I have a recording of our conversation in the car before that incident. Remember what you said? We have to kill the old man before he reports us, and let Marlene take the blame." David groaned. "Jess, I beg you, think about our future. What future? You chose another woman. That means I have nothing to lose. I'll leave her. I swear I'll never see her again. It's too late, David. I'm tired of the lies, the fear, waking up every day thinking about the man we killed. It's time to pay the price. Jessica took a tape recorder and several documents out of her bag. Here are copies of all the files on Marlene's case. Here's a recording of our conversation. And here's my confession, in which I describe in detail how we killed Robert Greene and framed an innocent woman. You're crazy! Maybe, but I can't live with this burden anymore. David rushed toward his wife, trying to grab the documents. A struggle ensued. They rolled around on the floor, screaming and scratching. Jessica was smaller and weaker, but her desperation gave her strength. Marlene realized it was time to act. She quickly made her way into the building through the back entrance. The insulin syringe jingled in her bag. The couple was so engrossed in the struggle that they didn't notice her approaching. Jessica was lying on the floor, David holding her wrists, preventing her from getting up. "Let me go!" she screamed. "It's too late anyway. My assistant at work has copies of the documents." "What assistant?" David barked. Mary Jones! If anything happens to me, she'll give everything to the police!" Marlene froze. Jessica had signed not only her own death warrant, but Mary Jones's as well. "Hello, Jessica," she said, stepping out of the shadows. Both spouses turned around. David's face was blank. Jessica's was filled with horror. "Mary, what are you doing here?" "Finishing what I started 7 years ago." Marlene took off her wig and wiped off most of her makeup. "Do you recognize me now, dear?" Jessica turned pale as a ghost. "Marlene, but you're in prison." "I was. 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days for a crime I didn't commit." David slowly got to his feet, unable to believe his eyes. "That's impossible. You can't be here." "I sure as hell can. And you know what? All these months, I've been watching you destroy each other. It was beautiful." Marlene took out a syringe. "What's that?" Jessica whispered. "Justice. Concentrated insulin. It'll look like an overdose of your tranquilizers." "Marlene, don't," David begged. "We can explain everything. Confess to the police. Get you justice." "It's too late. 7 years too late." She grabbed Jessica's arm. Jessica tried to break free, but Marlene was stronger. Years of prison training had not been wasted. "David, help me!" Jessica screamed. But David stood paralyzed, watching what was happening. Marlene injected the insulin into Jessica's wrist. The effect was almost instantaneous. The woman began to choke, her eyes rolled back and her body convulsed. "What have you done?" David whispered in horror. "The same thing you did to me. You ruined my life." Jessica gasped, trying to say something. Marlene leaned over her face. "What, dear?" "I'm sorry," Jessica croaked and fell silent. Marlene checked her pulse. Her heart had stopped. "She's dead," she said, standing up. David collapsed to his knees next to his wife's body. Jessie, I'm sorry." "Touching," Marlene remarked sarcastically. "Did you mourn me like this 7 years ago?" She put on gloves and began to stage the scene. An empty bottle of sedatives from Jessica's bag, scattered documents, signs of a struggle. "What are you doing?" David asked. "Creating problems for you. Tomorrow the police will find your wife's body here, dead from an overdose, and you'll be the only suspect." "But I have an alibi. I was with Valerie." Marlene smiled. "Valerie Stone doesn't exist. It was me all along." David stared at her with his mouth open. "It was you? Every message, every meeting, every kiss. Can you imagine what it was like to kiss the man who destroyed my life?" David tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't hold him. "You planned all this?" "Every detail. I had 7 years to plan this." Marlene gathered her things and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" David shouted. "Home. You can stay here and explain to the police why your wife is dead and you're alive." "They won't believe you. I don't have a motive." "You do. $1 million in insurance, an affair, threats of exposure, more than enough." Marlene paused in the doorway. "And you know what's wonderful? Now you'll feel the same way I did. The helplessness of being accused of a crime you didn't commit. The horror of realizing there's no way to prove your innocence. The despair of knowing your life is ruined forever. Marlene, please. Goodbye, David. See you in court. She disappeared into the night, leaving him alone with his dead wife and the weight of impending disaster. In the car, Marlene removed the rest of her makeup and changed her clothes. Mary Jones had died with Jessica. Now she had to become someone else. An hour later, an anonymous call alerted the police to screams coming from warehouse number 7. When the patrol arrived at the scene, they found David Watson in shock, sitting next to his wife's body. Detective Michael O'Connor arrived at warehouse number 7 at 10:30 in the evening. In his 20 years with the New Haven Police Department, he had seen a lot, but this scene was particularly grim. David Watson sat on the floor next to his wife's body, staring into space. He did not respond to the patrol officer's questions, as if he were in a trance. Mr. Watson? O'Connor crouched down in front of the suspect. Can you tell us what happened here? David slowly raised his eyes. They were filled with confusion and horror. She's dead, he whispered. Jess is dead. How did she die? Overdose. She's been taking tranquilizers for the last few weeks. She probably mixed up the dosage. O'Connor surveyed the scene. Signs of a struggle, scattered documents, an empty pill bottle next to the body. Everything pointed to a family drama that had ended in tragedy. What were you doing here so late? Jess asked to meet me. She said she wanted to talk about our relationship. What relationship? David fell silent. O'Connor noticed scratches on his face and hands. Mr. Watson, I must inform you of your rights. While the detective read the rights, David thought about Marlene. She had disappeared like a ghost, leaving him to deal with the aftermath. But who would believe such an incredible story? A wife who had served 7 years for murder, returning under a different name to seek revenge? David was taken to the station for questioning. O'Connor was an experienced investigator and quickly found weaknesses in his testimony. So your wife asked you to meet her at an abandoned warehouse at 8 p.m. for a family talk? The detective asked skeptically. Yes, a strange place to settle a dispute. Jess was special. She loved dramatic gestures. Where did the scratches on your face come from? We had an argument. Jess was upset and attacked me. What did you argue about? David hesitated. Telling the police about his affair with Valerie would give them a motive for murder. Work, financial problems? O'Connor didn't believe a word of it. During the night, he researched the Watson family's finances. No problems. Stable income, substantial savings, expensive real estate. But Jessica's life insurance policy was worth $1 million. The next morning, panic broke out in the Human Resources Department at New Haven Insurance. Mary Jones didn't show up for work and wasn't answering her phone. When the police arrived at the address listed on her documents, the apartment was empty. Neighbors said the woman had disappeared the night before. The HR director claims that this Mary Jones worked as Jessica Watson's assistant, O'Connor's partner, Detective Rivera, told him. An interesting coincidence. Too interesting. Check her records. The results of the check were shocking. Mary Jones had indeed existed, but she had died of cancer in a women's prison a year ago. Someone had used her identity. O'Connor returned to David with new questions. Did you know Mary Jones, your wife's assistant? David frowned. Jess sometimes mentioned a new employee. Why? This woman disappeared the same night your wife died, and she used a dead person's documents. David's heart began to race. Marlene was even more cautious than he had thought. I don't know what to tell you. I think you do. This woman may be the key to solving your wife's death. Meanwhile, Marlene, having changed her appearance and documents, watched the events unfold from a rented apartment in another part of town. She followed the news, read police reports, and studied the progress of the investigation. David was released on bail, but he remained under suspicion. The press had already dubbed the case the mysterious death in the warehouse. David's reputation was ruined. His friends avoided him, and his colleagues treated him with suspicion. A week after the murder, O'Connor received an anonymous package. It contained copies of documents from Jessica's computer, evidence of insurance fraud, a diary confessing to Robert Greene's murder, and an audio recording of the couple's conversation before the crime. Holy shit! The detective exhaled after listening to the recording. They killed the old man and framed his wife. Rivera looked over his shoulder. His wife? What wife? Marlene Watson. She served 7 years for a murder she didn't commit. You think she's connected to the disappearance of this Mary Jones? O'Connor wondered. Marlene Watson was supposed to be released from prison around the time Mary Jones got a job with Jessica. Check the exact date of Marlene Watson's release. The result was not long in coming. Marlene was released 2 days before Mary Jones applied for a job at the insurance company. I think we're dealing with the most sophisticated revenge plot I've ever seen, O'Connor said. A woman returned under a false name and systematically destroyed the people who ruined her life. But proving it was nearly impossible. Marlene left no direct evidence linking her to Jessica's murder. Everything pointed to a family conflict between the spouses. David was arrested 2 weeks later. The charge was serious: first-degree murder. His lawyer tried to build a defense based on the theory that Jessica had committed suicide, but the facts were against them. The trial began 6 months later. Marlene came to the courtroom every day, changing her appearance beyond recognition. She watched as the life of the man who had destroyed hers was torn apart. The prosecutor methodically built a case against David. The motive, insurance money and an affair. The means, a drug overdose. The opportunity, he was the only person with the victim at the time of her death. David Watson cold-bloodedly murdered his wife to collect insurance money and start a new life with his mistress, the prosecutor said in his closing argument. But his plan fell apart when his mistress disappeared, leaving him alone to deal with the consequences of his crime. The defense attorney desperately tried to sow doubt in the minds of the jury. My client was the victim of a carefully planned revenge. The mysterious Mary Jones, who used the dead woman's documents, disappeared on the night of the murder. This cannot be a coincidence. But the story was too far-fetched. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sitting in the courtroom listening to the verdict, Marlene felt a strange emptiness. She had dreamed of this moment for 7 years, but now that justice had been served, there was no joy, only exhaustion and the realization that Jessica's murder had changed her forever. After the verdict was announced, Detective O'Connor approached her. "Excuse me, we don't know each other," he said to the elderly woman in glasses and a wig. "Are you related to anyone involved in the trial?" "In a way," Marlene replied quietly. "I'm here on behalf of all the innocent people who have suffered at the hands of this man." O'Connor looked at her intently. "I have a theory about this case. Would you like to hear it?" "I'm listening." "I think Marlene Watson is alive. What's more, she planned and carried out the perfect revenge. And you know what? I'm not sure it's a bad thing." Marlene froze. "That's a serious accusation, Detective." "It's not an accusation. It's admiration. If my theory is correct, this woman demonstrated exceptional intelligence and willpower. And if she really did kill Jessica Watson?" O'Connor shrugged. "Then she did what the justice system failed to do. She restored justice." He handed her his business card. "If you see Marlene Watson, tell her that Robert Greene's case will be reviewed. The new evidence leaves no doubt that she is innocent." That evening, Marlene sat in her apartment, rereading articles about the trial. David got what he deserved. Jessica was dead. Justice had prevailed. But the price was high. Marlene realized that she had become a murderer. No matter how she justified her actions, the fact remained that she had taken a man's life. A call from her lawyer, Tom Rodriguez, interrupted her thoughts. "Marlene, where are you? I'm worried. You've been MIA since you got out." "I'm fine, Tom. Just starting a new life." "Have you heard the news? The Robert Greene case is being reopened. They found evidence that you were framed. Your name will be officially cleared." "I know. And one more thing. David Watson has been convicted of murdering his wife. Justice has finally prevailed." "Yes, Justice," Marlene repeated, her voice tinged with bitterness. After the conversation, she stared out the window at the lights of the city for a long time. A new life had begun, but the shadow of the past would remain with her forever. Marlene Watson was dead. both as an innocent victim of the system and as a person capable of cold-blooded murder. The person who remained was someone else. Someone who knew the price of justice and was willing to pay it. A month after the trial, she left New Haven for good. In her luggage, she had a new identity, a little money, and a load of memories to live with. The story is over, but the consequences will haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. David is in prison, Jessica is in her grave, and Marlene is somewhere between the past and the future, between victim and executioner.